Hello and welcome to another video by the Avnet Services DevOps team. My name is Dan Zankaroff. I'm the DevOps practice lead, and today we're going to be talking about the IBM UrbanCode deploy product and the basics of setting up LDAP integration in that product. Okay, before we get too deep into anything on the UrbanCode tool end, it's useful to understand the back-end directory we'll be connecting to so that we understand the LDAP structures and what they're looking like and how they map back to the objects we create in UrbanCode. Most LDAP integrations are more of a mapping exercise than anything else, so you have to have some knowledge of the LDAP directory. If you do not, I would strongly recommend you talking to one of your LDAP administrators to help them guide you through and make sure you're connecting to the right objects. It'll save you a lot of time in the long run. All right, on the back end here we've got a simple Apache directory server set up, really rudimentary, just a couple of simple objects and organizations set up here. We just have a simple users tree with one logical grouping here for engineering, and those users are then mapped into a series of groups we've created over here with just a handful of developers, some operations or one operations person, and a couple of testers. And we'll be using these user designations and these groupings as we create objects in UrbanCode. With that, let's flip over to UrbanCode and start hooking things up, and we'll refer back to some of this as we go. Okay, now that we understand a little bit about the underlying directory and the LDAP structures that we're working with in our environment, the next thing to do is to teach UrbanCode how to look things up in that directory and get it to do what we want it to do. And we do that by going to the Settings tab here. We log in with administrative rights, go to the Settings tab, and on the Settings tab we're most interested in this middle row, the authentication and authorization categories on this row. Authentication deals with user credentials. Can the user log in? Does the LDAP directory tell UrbanCode that yes, we know who this user is and they've given us a valid password? And authorization is the second part of that question. Is okay, now that we've allowed this user to log in, what can that user actually see and do in the system? They're two highly related questions, but they're actually dealt with differently. The idea that we know who you are and then what you can see are actually two distinct questions and information sets in the system. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to do the mapping for the groups and the users in turn. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is set up our authorization groups mapping. That's the recommended procedure with the UrbanCode tool, so we're going to do it that way. So to do that, we go into the authorization section here and click Create Authorization Realm. That's the fancy way of saying LDAP group mappings, and so we'll just give it a name here. Example groups LDAP mapping. Doesn't necessarily matter too terribly much. We obviously want to specify type as LDAP or Active Directory. It's a bit of a misnomer. The Active Directory interface is an LDAP API standard, just the same as a regular directory. So if you've got Active Directory or LDAP, it really is kind of the same setting. There are obviously other ways we can set up other authorization realms here, but we're talking about LDAP today, so we will stay there. The search type label deals with how the actual group mapping works for your particular LDAP directory schema. There are really two ways LDAP directories deal with this. One is an approach that says, these are the groups. Each group keeps that information inside its record in a series of attributes that say, okay, for this group record, here are all the members. And those members are just pointers to user records. The opposite way is each user record maintains that mapping information, so each user record will have a series of group entries that, or group references that point to actual real group entries. In our particular case, we're the former. The groups in this directory server maintain their membership information internally, so we can take a quick look at that, see what that looks like in the system. Log back in here, and we go in and look at a group record. We will see here for all this information. And here's the specific information about the groups. My official group name is its canonical name. And then here's some member records that are contained inside this group. While I'm here, I can also look at the search route for this tree. I can put this anywhere in the directory tree. For this particular case, since I'm just concerned with these three groups, I can put the search route right here at this particular point in the tree. So its reverse notation starts with the lowest level object and works its way to the top level object. So OU equals EXUC groups, DC equals example, DC equals com, and the separator between those three parameters is a comma, in case it's not easily visible on the screen. Okay, so I can come back in here. My search type label says roles in LDAP reference their members. Look up group membership by searching for roles. So I want to search for groups as opposed to the second one, which is users. Okay, and so then we're going to put the right parameters in here. So EXUC groups, and then DC equals example, DC equals com. My group search filter, as we saw, the attribute we need is member equals, and then we're going to use curly bracket 0 close curly bracket, which is a wildcard, and it tells it to populate the member UID into that parameter and use that as our search key. And then, as we saw, also the group name is stored in the CN attribute, and we can go ahead and click save from there and be good to go. So the next step is, after creating our authorization searches, we want to set up the authentication mapping and the associated searches. So we're going to go back to settings, go into authentication, and once again we're going to create a new realm. So example auth realm, for example authentication realm, put in a nicer definition there. Allows us to limit login attempts. If you leave it blank, 0, obviously you'd use a number in here that was appropriate to your environment, to the policy defined by your system administration. We want to specify an LDAP or Active Directory search. Just as with authorization, there's the same set of options. Again, we're working with LDAP or Active Directory today. Then we want to associate with an authorization realm. So this setting maps back to the authorization realm we just created. It happens to be first alphabetically, but if we needed to, we'd simply select it from our drop-down box. Then we need to specify a URL to the server. So just to be clear here, one of the things that just because we set up the authorization realm, where we set up a bunch of search parameters, you'll notice there was nothing in there in the authorization realm for actually connecting to the directory server. That's done with the authentication realm, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because you need to connect and authenticate to the directory server in order to do those searches, and that implies credentials and so on and so forth. But you need a way to map the groups to the user. So this is the order that's set up in the tool and the way that you go about doing that. All right. Well, in order to make the connection, in order to set up the authentication realm, we need to make the connection to the server. Okay, so just like a web URL, which would be HTTP or HTTPS, there's an LDAP. There's a formatting for LDAP, and we can simply use LDAP or LDAP-S if it was for the exact same reason if it was SSL or not. In our case, it's not, and we are just on the local host. And we are on port 10389. For reference, the default LDAP port is 389. It's been moved on this VM because we have a lot of stuff on the VM and kind of needed to. We can search anonymously. Some directory servers are set up to allow that, an unauthenticated connection, and you can do searches. Most are not, and they're going to require some specific credentials. The credentials are delivered by putting in a specific set of user credentials. So remember how we looked at user IDs and saw how they went they were down to a particular marker. So we're going to put a specific user ID in here and the password for it. And that will be the credentials that UrbanCode uses to connect to the LDAP server to actually conduct its searches. Okay. All right. So now we're back into searching again, and we need to make a choice of how we want UrbanCode to search. And there are two typical scenarios. There's the scenario that all the users are in one tree in one bucket, or there's the scenario where there are many user buckets spread out on many branches of the tree, and they may not have a very good common root. In our case, we actually have that situation where there are actually two places where users exist in the directory as it's set up, which we do for demo purposes. So we're going to go ahead and do that and look where the users are for our little example here. Back to our LDAP browser, and we'll see all our users are in a number of buckets under the example UC users tree here. So I'm going to go in here, look at that, look at our path. Just as in authorization, it's the same format, a series of comma separated parameters. So OU equals EX UC users, DC equals example, DC equals com. So there's a little comma separated thing, and we need to tell it what to search on. So if I'm searching for a particular user ID, where is that user ID going to be found in the schema? So take a quick look at one of the users. See that our unique identifier is user ID or UID. That's the attribute I care about. That's the what the user will be logging in with. So UID equals, and again, curly 0 curly is the wildcard in this particular scenario. And we're going to go ahead and let it search the subtree. Two last parameters here before we save. One is for the name or more formal name, and the email attribute. So, and we obviously need that for being able to set up notification automatically when we get the users from LDAP. So we're going to look at our example user record here, and we see mail is their email address. It's a mail attribute, and the nice name is in the CN attribute. So we're going to hop over here. Name attribute is CN, and the mail attribute is mail. Click Save, and we now have an example realm set up. So now that we've created our authentication realm, we want to see if it works, and the simple test for that is to go out and have it import a user. So we're going to go ahead and import the user we were just poking at a little bit there, and we see it return and populate the user into the system, which is good. We see it tells us two things. One, that the authentication information we put into UrbanCode so that it could authenticate with LDAP to do the queries clearly worked, because we got data back, and even better, we got the data we were looking for back. We got there's the username, and it populated in his fancy full name and his email address right into the system. The other thing that should have happened behind the scenes is that it should have automatically created a sort of bare group that Bob was a member of, the JPS developers group, and it automatically created that. So it's laying the groundwork as we go forward. We'll be able to add authorization and permissions to that group and map this group to roles as we'd like to or as we need to going forward. So that's all very good and all very automatic. So we can manually import folks and have them show up in groups just like that. The other thing that the system will do is beyond the bulk import or manual user administrator adding them into the system, down the road you're going to have people come and go off of teams, and their membership in groups are going to change. Maybe you hire somebody, add them to the team. You don't want to have to manually dig through all this stuff to add every user every time somebody joins. So the system's actually smart enough that the first time somebody who isn't in the system logs in, they'll be able to log in, and it will automatically add them and query LDAP and get their information back into the system and allow them to log in. So let's illustrate that real quick with an example. Just pick one of our other users from the group here, and we'll just use this guy. So we should be able, even though we did not import him manually, we should be able to log in with his credentials because he was created in the LDAP by the HR people. Log in. Of course, he doesn't have any permissions or anything yet. We haven't set up any permissions with any of the groups, so this is actually kind of the expected white screen of nothingness. And we'll go in here in a second and look at mapping to roles so that people can actually log in and see stuff. But this is really good. We logged in, as you can see, it pulled this guy's name, and when we go back in as admin, we should see him right there in the list with our first guy, the guy we manually imported. And we do. That's very nice. And he should be a member of a different group. And there it is, the testers group that the second user was a part of showed up. So we're good to go. We're pulling in the right information, and LDAP is functioning at this point. From here on, we turn into regular security administrators. Got one more thing we need to look at, and after that, you'll be able to use LDAP with the standard security processes of the tool. So the last thing we're going to take a quick look at is how the LDAP functionality maps into the standard security administration in the UrbanCode deploy tool. There's another video on security administration as a topic unto itself, so we're not going to get too deep into that, and we're going to take for granted some knowledge from that video as we go into this discussion. Now, to illustrate how this works, I've created a simple JPET store underbar dev role in the tool, JPS_dev, and this would be a role or a set of permissions that would be relevant for somebody in the developer role on that team. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create the team for JPET store as an application as a whole. And the team, of course, would include all of the testers, developers, and any operations or other roles that were affiliated with it. But that's really not the point of this exercise. When I create a team, or I have a team, I have the roles available underneath that team. And as you can see, I've created JPET store developers, and I can add users who are going to take that role on that team, and I can do that either at the specific user name. Obviously, here's our test users, or I can grab one of the groups that was brought in by our LDAP integration. So here's one of our LDAP groups that we were looking at earlier. I can associate that with that role on that team, and what that means is that people who are in that LDAP group as users are now going to get the permissions associated with that role and the process will then be scalable whenever somebody's added to that or removed from that, as people move around teams or get added or removed or whatever. It's all going to be taken care of. It's going to be automatic, and so that's going to create a scalable administrative situation, which is really the whole point of LDAPs. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do that kind of administration in every tool that you have in your environment. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This video is presented by the Avnet Services DevOps practice as part of our ongoing effort to enhance the broader knowledge base of the DevOps community. We're available at the social media links listed on the screen, and you can reach me at the contact information below. Again, my name is Dan Zencroft. I'm the DevOps practice lead. Thank you again for your attention, and have a good day.